Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast brought to you by Violet Defense. Our guest today is John Seman. He's a certified athletic administrator, and he just took the job of athletic director at Cheltenham High School in Cheltenham, Pennsylvania. John, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Jake. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we know we were talking before we came on. It's a busy time for you, so we're going to get going right away. We always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school, and how you ended up now at Cheltenham.
Yeah, so I grew up in a place called the Poconos, which is pretty much northern Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, in a place called Lake Wallenpaupack, which I'm very proud of. And then from there, I became, went to East Stroudsburg University and got my bachelor's in health and physical education. And then after that, I found my way down to Philadelphia. But in between those, I was a varsity athlete, a four-year letterman at Wallenpaupack. I played soccer my entire career. I was pretty much soccer year-round. I thought that I was going to get recruited heavily. That did not happen. So I knew that I wanted to be involved in athletics. I knew that I had a passion for sports, and I knew I wanted to be around that. So phys ed and health was something that, was something I was definitely interested in. So going to East Stroudsburg University and having a dual major in that, had a great time down there, built some positive relationships down there, still have friends that are over there, and then made my way to Philadelphia. Got my first teaching job in the inner city of Philadelphia in Kensington, and was at John B. Stetson Charter School, which is a part of the Spira Charter School Network. And the principal who hired me is actually my principal now at Cheltenham High School. So there's a little connection there. He, spent about 5 years coaching sports there and becoming like the athletic director, because that school had just turned charter. So it was, you jumped in. I was worried about being a first-year teacher, doing that correctly, doing it efficiently, and making a difference, and coaching. And I was told, hey, you're the athletic director too. So from day one, that's what happened. And then I just kept developing myself. I went into a master's program at Cabrini University and got my master's in educational leadership. I have my principal certification in the state of Pennsylvania, and then became the district director of athletics for the Aspira PA Charter School Network. Started that in 2015 and oversaw a 6A high school, built our football program up from basically middle of the road type team to rank number 3 in the city. And then also oversaw 3 middle schools, and did that overall, was about overseeing 60 athletic programs. So, and I didn't have a secretary. I didn't have athletic coordinators. I was basically developing that. And this year we were going to have athletic coordinators, but I was offered the position here at Cheltenham Township School District to oversee their director of athletics and activities. So that's kind of my journey. And Cheltenham is kind of right outside the city. It is a suburban school district, public school district. And definitely excited to be here, new challenges. And it's kind of a blank slate. It's, I'm hitting the ground running. I was telling you that earlier before we get on here. And I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to make a difference. So.
Oh, great story. And you touched on a couple of key things. The relationships that you built early on in your career obviously paid great dividends, with your former principal, now the principal at the school where you're at, and wearing all those different hats. There's just no substitute for the hands-on, boots on the ground experience that you get at those smaller schools. So I definitely know what you're talking about. John, another question that we ask our athletic directors has to do with mentorship. Leadership is so important in our profession. And so I'm curious, who are some of your mentors, either, family members, maybe teachers or coaches that you had, maybe people that you've worked with or worked for? Who can you tell us?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, just to touch on your point too, I mean, I think it's important to be engulfed in this profession, and just touching on the fact that, you have to kind of extend your time where you need to go. And I think that's kind of how I've made it to where I have, but volunteer your time to where you need to go. But as far as mentors are concerned, obviously my parents, I think that this job takes a very strong work ethic, and I think you have to love what you do. And I'm fortunate enough to say that I do love what I do, being an athletic director. And I think that my parents have kind of instilled those morals and values in me, as far as, the job's not done until it's done, and you give everything 110%, and you do the best possible job you can do. I think from there, obviously, I would say, like, my soccer coach going through high school, and being a 4-year letterman, and he was a principal, and kind of still having that relationship and picking his brain from time to time. But also, I'll say the principal at the high school right now that I'm at, who was my first principal, who hired me as a phys ed teacher, was obviously a big influence on me. He was actually the one who supported me when I started my principal certification, and mentored me in that realm. And then also the principal after him was very influential in what I did at Aspira. And then, and then obviously my colleagues, Mike Poplawski, he's a CMAA, and he got me into the NIAAA in the Charter School League when we first started. And then also Paul Reiser, who I talk to pretty much every single day. Every single day, you got to have that one person you can call just to kind of pick their brain about certain situations. And Paul has been in the field for a long, long time, even as a collegiate athletic director at one point. So it's good to have those relationships and mentors. And I would say Holly Farnese as well. And I know Holly was on the podcast too. Holly and I have a good relationship. She kind of was the one who helped me become an instructor in the NIAAA. And she's somebody I also value a lot. And she's been in this league that I'm in now. So it's good to have those relationships, and I'm still building those relationships with another gentleman, Scott Layer from Council Rock High School, who's also an assistant principal and athletic director, and reached out to me because he was in my shoes about 12 years ago at Cheltenham. So, and reached out to me to provide that support. So, which is pretty cool. So,
I just love hearing the stories. And again, you mentioned a couple of names, Paul, we're going to have on the podcast down the road, and Holly, I saw Holly, present years ago when I was at a national conference, and, our paths ended up connecting several years ago, where now I'm part of her team for the two middle school LTI courses. It's very cool to see those connections. John, we get a lot of younger athletic directors, or let's say even ADs, that are new to the profession. And I think it's important for them to hear, about the journey that we all have with our state association and our national association. So you touched on that a little bit with some of your mentors, but how did you get involved with, the LTI program, and talk about, working through and earning your CAA?
Yeah, I think what's funny with that is, being that first year teacher, I don't think I would have imagined 5 years later I would become an athletic director and be doing those type of things. But the reality is, when we were in the charter school league that we started, and Mike Poplawski was influential in that, he kind of connected me to the NIAAA. So going to those AD meetings, he had started that with Holly, and Holly was a big mentor for him. And he did a great job providing us those resources to start those trainings in that league. And once I caught wind of it, obviously, I knew that this is what I wanted to do for pretty much the rest of my career. I knew that, again, I wanted to be around sports. I loved athletics and the athletic director realm, and just kind of providing those opportunities through educational-based athletics for our kids, our community, our programs, and developing programs really fascinated me. And I saw that the NIAAA was the first time that I was affiliated with that, was through that middle school charter school league back in 2000, probably back in 2014 when I was still coaching at the time. And then from there, I met Holly, and then, Holly obviously being a very big influence with PSATA, which is the Pennsylvania State Athletic Directors Association, going up there every single year and meeting other athletic directors from the state of Pennsylvania, and also, meeting new vendors and talking to people, picking brains. We all face the same challenges. I mean, it's funny. You say that, but I know that multiple people on this podcast have probably said that before, that we all face the same challenges. And when you go to the national conference, you see that more evident, that somebody in Iowa is still having the same type of issues that you might have. And you're trying to bounce those ideas and best practices off each other, which is really powerful. And I would say that was my journey from the NIAAA and PSATA. And I'll also throw out the Texas High School State Athletic Directors Association. I think somebody who's going to be a mentor for me is Andre Walker from Houston Independent School District. My wife has family in Houston, so we flirt with the idea of, hey, will we ever get down there? And going to the Texas High School State Athletic Directors Conference this past year, I kind of got to pick get some new ideas and kind of bounce ideas off what I do to what they do, and talking to the director of athletics for Corpus Christi and getting those ideas. I think it's very powerful, and it's pretty cool. So that's pretty much my journey through the NIAAA and the state association.
I wouldn't be doing my job as a longtime member of the NIAAA certification committee if I didn't ask, where are you in that path toward earning that CMAA now?
So I actually started that, and I should have had it done by now, to be honest with you. But I was so worried about getting principal certification, and I have my Texas principal cert almost done as well, just in case. And that is what needs to happen next. And I've started that process, and should have that completed, I would say, by January. So.
Very cool. So, we'll be seeing a new CMAA, in the ranks. Okay?
And you can hold me to it, Jake. That's you can hold me to it.
Okay. Well, I will. Yeah. We got it on the podcast right here. We are visiting with John Seman, CAA from Cheltenham High School, Cheltenham, Pennsylvania. We're going to continue with the interview, but right now we're going to take a quick break and hear from our podcast sponsor, Violet Defense. Violet Defense is dedicated to protecting our world from germs by bringing the power of UV disinfection to everyday spaces. Their patented technology enables them to harness the power of the sun to incorporate ultraviolet light into products and environments like never before. Whether you're ready to implement existing products, or if you'd like to explore researching and developing a custom deployment of their technology for your school, Violet Defense has the solutions and the experience you need. Thanks again to Violet Defense for sponsoring the Educational AD Podcast. Welcome back to our interview with Jason Seman from Cheltenham High School. For our listeners, we're recording this on August 19th, so it's actually going to be pretty timely by the time you listen to it. John, one of the things that we like to do with the podcast is this idea of sharing best practices. So I'm going to put you on the spot. What are some things that you've done at your previous schools that maybe you want to bring to your new school at Cheltenham, that when you look back, you say, boy, we really do a great job with this? What are some best practices you can share?
Yeah, I think when you look at, even with best practices, you're trying to look at what kind of challenges do you face at your school, and then also kind of how can you support educational-based athletics by providing supports for those challenges, right? So you might be limited in one area, but not limited in the other. I'll tell you, at my previous district, we did things, we use stipends as a measure of, almost extra duty, extra pay, which is what we do here at Cheltenham. We call it extra duty, extra pay. One of the things that I put in place, just being around 4 different schools, overseeing 60 athletic programs in my previous district, was a student athlete academic advisor. I thought that was extremely important. I created a stipend for that position. It wasn't going through the counselor, but that person was going to report to me and the head coach every week. So I would send that person rosters, and then they would report to myself and the head coach. And if we had students who were failing or students who were at risk with D's or C's, they would make sure they reported that every single week. And then it was my job to kind of hold our coaches to that standard, and the coach's job to hold our student athletes to that standard. Because the expectation was that we weren't going to allow student athletes to participate in athletic contests if they were failing any classes whatsoever. And I felt like we needed to put a support system in place to make sure that we could do that. The other thing that I do as far as best practice, I feel like, and maybe it's a little bit, I don't know, minor, but for me, it's kind of major, is I create a Google Doc schedule. So I'll take all our team schedules and I'll put them in basically with each one of our coaches and our sports, and I will put in that schedule in a Google spreadsheet, everything we got going on that day, the location, the time, all of that. I will also incorporate the days we have off from school. I'll incorporate our PIAA start dates, end dates, first practice dates, things like that. And then also highlight things. So if we have a game, for example, one of our JV field hockey games just got canceled this morning, I will go in there and basically, canceled and exit out, and then and highlight it, because I need to be mindful. It just keeps me on task. It's something that needs to happen, so that way I can communicate with our coaches and all stakeholders that are involved with athletics to make sure, whether that's transportation, security, the police department, whatever it is, just to make sure that I'm keeping myself on task to the things that need to be done. And then after that next day, I just delete that line. And then we're on the next day. It kind of keeps me focused on, okay, this is what's going on today. And then also trying to be proactive, because, when we try to schedule non-league games, where does that fit? All those type of things. That's something that I do as far as a best practice. But the other thing too, I'll just say, is that the principal cert comes in. I'm a big believer, and I always say this, that we're not in the business of getting rid of people. We're in the business of developing people. And I think that's very important. And I think how you do that through walkthroughs and evaluations, and your preseason meeting with coaches, exit meeting with coaches. And if you go out to the field and you do a walkthrough, to follow that up and have an open line of communication to where you're giving them a support. So if you see something that might be a managerial task, a discipline task, that you're providing a support that maybe they can try to see if that enhances the ability to do that. And I think that's about developing people and being open and transparent and so on. So,
just really great stuff, and a good illustration of, there's a lot of different names for it, but the iceberg principle comes to mind. People show up at a game and they see the game run flawlessly. They just don't understand, unless they're an AD, all the things that went into it, this organization, the scheduling, all the different facets of scheduling, the professional development that occurs in working with a coach, whether it's a young coach or a veteran coach, and all the other things that go into it. Great explanation there. Definitely some best practices. John, another question we've been asking our ADs has to do with just the increased focus. And I think it's a very good focus on the mental, emotional health of student athletes. As I said, we're recording this on August 19th, so the Olympics are still very much in the back of our minds there. Great competition, great success by our U.S. program. And again, looking at someone like Simone Biles, who was very candid and outspoken, about some of the mental and emotional challenges that she was facing. And whether it's, a world-class athlete or a Generation Z student athlete that we're working with at our schools, we just don't understand, the things that they're experiencing. So here's my question. How can athletic directors and coaches, how can we do a better job of balancing, that, and I'm going to phrase this in extremes, that old school, come on, you got to be tough, you got to suck it up, you got to get back in there. How do you balance that with being aware and sensitive and acknowledging those emotional challenges that, our Generation Z athletes are facing?
Yeah, and I think that's a multifaceted question. I think that it put me on the spot, Jake. It's good though, because the reality is we have to look, and here at Cheltenham, one of the things that I do, you call this a best practice too, is the first thing I did was speak about our mission and vision, what our athletic department's going to be. And part of that mission and vision is developing the whole child, intellectually, socially, emotionally. And I think that as coaches, we have a difficult job to do. I mean, and the athletic administrator as well, kind of making sure that coaches understand that you're more than just a coach. You're trying to develop athletes but also be aware of that mental and social impact that might occur. And I think that the first thing that comes to my mind with that is just listen and listen to your athletes and make sure that we have resources in the school. So whether it's a counselor or whatnot, that we can have these conversations in a safe environment. But at the end of the day, I think it's very important that we be mindful of everybody's, I would say, mental or emotional state. And that, putting an athlete out there who is not in the Simone Biles is a perfect example of that. Might not know everything that's going on with that child. And we really don't know what was going on with Simone Biles in the Olympics. And we have to be aware of that we have to provide supports for our athletes and make sure that we're taking into account their mental and social needs, and that we're not putting our athletes out there when mentally that could do way more harm than good. And I think it's important that we all acknowledge that. And I think when we talk about supports, I think, working with our guidance counselors, psychologists, and then also what kind of supports do we have in the community that can help support this? And I'll be honest with you, Jake, I'm happy you asked me that question, because right away in my head I'm thinking, who can I go to in this community who can support with this to make sure that our students have the needs, that our students have the support that they need when it comes to this category, this dynamic when it comes to social, emotional, and mental, your mental state in athletics. So I do think we need to take that very seriously, and I do think that we need to listen, and that we need to direct our athletes and our coaches on how to handle those situations a little bit better.
No, I apologize for putting you on the spot, but I think you hit it out of the park. Very well done. The listening, of course, as a first line, and then having coaches and school personnel, be aware that, hey, it's not like it was, 100 years ago when I was a student athlete. It's better. We know more, and we need to address it. Great stuff. John Seman, certified athletic administrator from Cheltenham, Pennsylvania. We're going to be back, but right now we're going to take another quick break and hear from our new sponsor, Sideline Interactive. Sideline Interactive provides indoor scoring tables and video boards that can generate $10,000 or more every single year, while also creating more excitement in your gym. Their score tables and video boards also help make the ultimate game day experience by creating lifelong memories for your student athletes. Go to sidelineinteractive.com or call 832-786-0302 to schedule a live web demo and see their tables and boards in action. You can also email them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com. That's sales@sidelineinteractive.com. See what their fantastic products can do for you, your school, and your student athletes. Welcome back. We've got John Seman, certified athletic administrator, Cheltenham High School, Cheltenham, Pennsylvania. John, this has been pretty cool connecting with you and hearing about, some of the connections, that we both share, but we're not done yet. We always like to wrap up with what we call the athletic director's toolbox. And you've already shared that you're an experienced, very successful athletic administrator. But right now, I'm going to challenge you to send out a brand new AD on the very first job, but I'm only going to let you put 3 things in their toolbox. What 3 items are going to go in John Seman's athletic director toolbox?
Okay, I think so. First thing comes to my mind, and I kind of mentioned it before in the podcast, is the work ethic. I don't think you could be successful in this job without a strong work ethic, and that also means being visual. And I know on your podcast you've heard this before, but being visual, especially when you first start out like I am right now, is important, because the other part of this is building those positive relationships, not just with the coaches and hearing and them and communicating with them as far as what our expectations are when it comes to our mission and vision for our athletic department centered around educational-based athletics, but also building those relationships with parent boosters, which I'm currently doing right now, building those relationships with our central office, our central admin team, when our facilities department, our transportation department, our HR department, want to make sure that we're all on the same page. And I think that when you first start out, it is kind of a whirlwind. I'm fortunate enough, like I said, I'm coming into this position. I know what to do. It's a matter of how quickly can I make it happen. Considering the fact that we already have fall sports, practicing right now, and I just started a week and a half ago. So the part of that for me is making sure you're visual, making sure you have a strong work ethic. And then I think the other part of this is not being afraid to reach out to other athletic directors in your circle, and making sure that, if there's something that you need to bounce an idea off of. For example, we were doing heat acclimation last week for football, and I just looked at our trainer and said, "This is way too hot to be out here." And he looked at me, and I said, "Let me make a phone call." And I called some schools, some ADs in the area. I said, "Yeah, John, we stopped about an hour ago." And then I shut it down. It was a way for me to gauge what I thought was already the right thing to do, but just wanted to make sure and touch base with some other individuals. And I think that it's important that you do that. You're not afraid to reach out. And then I think the other one too for me, and this is, we talked about listening to student athletes, but also listening to coaches, listening to parents, showing empathy for situations is very important. But sometimes, which I'm not sure how many people would admit to this, but sometimes you have to admit when you're wrong. So if I'm double booked a facility space that I thought was going to be available, and then I realize there's a safety concern, sometimes you got to take ownership of that with the person that is in conflict, and you've got to kind of own up to that. And I think that's a good quality of a leader, to make sure that you're owning up to your own mistakes when that happens. And it's not just, hey, this is, I don't do anything wrong. We all do something wrong, and it's important that we own up to that sometimes. So for me, I mean, those might be three little things, but for me, they can be very impactful. Making sure that you have a strong work ethic, that you're visual, that you're building those positive relationships, and that, when something doesn't go the way it should go, and you have some fault of that you're owning up to that with that coach or whatever. And I feel like you're able to move on from that effectively. And I'll give you an example with that too, is just happened to me coming in here, is that we had volleyball happening and we had field hockey happening, and the field hockey coach wanted to use the gym space in the very back. And I didn't think it would come into conflict, but it did once I saw that the volleyball system was in the center of the gym, and that she needed to use the net, obviously. And it's her, when volleyball's in season, it's her gym. And when I'm looking at volleyballs and I'm looking at field hockey balls, I was like, this is a safety concern. Even though I told the field hockey coach I didn't think it would be an issue, when I went up there that first day and saw it was an issue, it was important for me to communicate to her, hey, I should have known better. I should have looked at this differently. But looking at this now, this is a major safety concern, and we have to make adjustments. And that went a long way with her, I think. And it's important that we do make those adjustments, and we're always looking at the safety of our kids, and making sure that we're doing those things correctly. So,
no, that's a very strong collection of tools. I think you shoehorned 4 or 5 in there, but they're all great. And on the last one, I'll go out on a limb, or I'll go on record by saying I don't think there's a more effective and long-lasting way to build that relationship with your coaches than to do just what you said. When you screw up, you got to own it. Hey, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Let's move on. And that just goes so far in building those, relationships, that trust, everything that you mentioned. Great stuff. John, if one of our listeners wants to reach out and pick your brain a little bit, and I certainly encourage you to do so, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
So they get a hold of me through email, which would be jseman@cheltenham.org. Or if they wanted to contact me directly, they could do that as well. I'd be open to that as well, just because, like I told you before, building these relationships around the country, we're all dealing with the same thing. So it's kind of nice to bounce ideas off each other. So if anybody wanted to reach out to me, they could call my work number at 215-479-2915. So
appreciate you sharing that. John Seman, certified athletic administrator, Cheltenham High School, Cheltenham, Pennsylvania. Thanks so much for being on the podcast, and all the best with the new job.
I appreciate it, Jake. It was a pleasure.
For our listeners, remember the Zoom recordings of these interviews are being uploaded to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We appreciate you listening today. Come back again next time for another episode of the Educational AD Podcast.